Well, here we are, end of the first week of April, and already, as you can see, some of the ice is already melting off the river. Not soon enough. Today we've got a full lineup. We're going to transplant some of those tomato seedlings, and already they're doing really well. And we're going to pick some chaga that I found on one of the trees out there. I'm going to show you how to make a pot of chaga, and we're going to do a few other fun things here. So why don't you join me? We're going to have a little bit of fun today. Thanks for coming along. So a couple weeks ago we started these little tomato seedlings in these little peat pots, and right now they're about 3 inches tall, 3.5 inches tall. So we're going to transfer them to these little beer cups that we get at the dollar store. We poke a few holes in the bottom, and what I like to do is get some of these trays at the dollar store. You can also get the plastic ones. And then once these are on there, I'm going to put these back on the racks that I have behind me underneath the grow lights. And what I need to do with these, as you can see, the roots are already transferred like right through these peat pots down here. And I'm going to put these down so that just the tops of the leaves here are sticking out of the cups, because we want as much root growth as possible. With tomato plants, all of these stems are going to grow into roots, and that'll encourage even more growth. Then what I'm going to do, since we're only in the middle of April here, or first week of April, is probably in about 3 weeks time, this will all be full of roots as well. I'm going to take these out of here, and then I'm going to put these in larger yogurt containers like this, and that'll encourage even more root growth. And I'll do that for about a month before I transfer them over into my garden. So, before we get going, I also use this really good Miracle Grow soil. Don't use just the cheap dollar store stuff. So, let's get going. Put a little bit of dirt in the bottom. And then, I know I've got like 3 or 4 plants in here. I'll leave them in there, and then what I may do is separate these later on. And then make 2 or 3 plants out of these. So I just keep putting dirt in here until these are sticking out just exactly the way I want them. Just like that. And then I fill these up gently. Careful that I don't break the plant. Moving the dirt around. And it's nice, make sure your dirt is dry while you're doing this. Just like so. So, let's keep going around. So a few weeks ago I started some peppers as well as the tomatoes. Peppers are a little slower growing, and I had some old seed and I wasn't sure if they were going to germinate or not, and I have 3 containers here, and obviously none of them germinated. So I've run out of store-bought packages, but I found a package of yellow and red pepper seeds here. So I'm going to give them a shot, and usually these take a couple of weeks or so to germinate. So you know what, I'm going to use them all. And if they don't work, they don't work. So I'm going to be a little liberal here and just go ahead and put them in these containers. And I'd mentioned before that I use these old recycled mushroom containers, and these here are actually have holes in the bottom, and I put them in these trays here that used to have flower pots in them for drainage. So I do poke some holes in the bottom as well so they don't flood. Actually, there's going to be too many seeds here, so I'm not going to use them all after all. So we'll be generous with the amount of seeds I put in here. So we'll put some back just in case they do work. I can always plant some inside the greenhouse later on. To move things around when they do start growing, sometimes I always have 4 or 5 pairs of these long tweezers from my medical kits here. So I'm just going to put a really thin layer of soil on here. Just barely covering them, about 1/4 of an inch of dirt. It's a good growing medium here. Again, I use the Miracle Grow for this. Just give them a little dusting here. And these trays go on a heat mat that I have, and the temperature right now on here says 89 degrees. It just helps with the germination. Now before these come up, I have a tray over top to help with the condensation with the moisture, but because these plants are up already, I won't be able to cover these. So once this is done, just give them a little bit of a watering just to keep the dirt moist. And hopefully, in about a week's time, we should start to see these shoots come up just a little bit. And that's about it. Well, another beautiful spring day to be planting. And these crops in here have been doing very well throughout the winter, but today we're going to be using a little bit of space that's left over here, and I've got a few leek seeds that I'm going to be putting in here, and I'm also going to use a container to put some catnip in here and start a few of the plants in here. So let's get you a little closer and let's get going and plant some seeds in here. Okay, so to plant these leeks in here, I've got the Tadorna leeks that I'm going to be putting in here. These take 110 days to mature, or actually to mature. These are also open pollinated. I'm just going to put, I've got enough here for about 2 rows. So I'm just going to, and I can go by feel here, just from experience as well. And I may have to thin these out a little bit or transplant these here. I've got enough here for 2 rows. And I'm going to put these about 4 inches apart. Yeah, there's no doubt I'm going to have to transplant these at some point, but this will give them a good spot to get a good head start. And I'm just going to lightly cover them over. This soil here is very loamy. I'm going to explain to you in just a little bit about this soil in here. And so I remember what this is in here. I'm just going to stick this back here. But the soil back here, I mean, I've got layers and layers of different types of things in here, decomposing things, and there's a bunch of worms in here as well. I usually get some worms that I put in here, but it's very loamy soil, and I do make my own soil. And at some point too, I'm going to show you how I go ahead and I make my own soil. So in a couple of weeks, hopefully we'll start to see some things coming out of the ground. These do take a while to germinate, but we'll see how this goes. This is fairly damp right now, but I'm going to go tamp this down just a little bit and then just give them a little bit of water. So while we're in here today, I'm going to start some champion curled parsley in a couple of these mushroom containers. And I'm just going to leave these in here. It's warm enough in here now. We use quite a bit of parsley too, and I'm eventually going to plant some flat leaf parsley as well. And we have some wooden boxes that I install in here in this greenhouse once I take this plastic off in about a month's time, when it's going to be plenty warm enough in here. But I'm going to start a few of these in here just to see how they do, just sort of as an experiment. And if they do well, then these may just be transplanted outside later on. So I'm just going to scatter some seed on here and then lightly cover them with some soil. I want to quickly explain to you the concept of this greenhouse here. I have had no heat at all in this greenhouse all winter, and I planted some of these crops here in the fall. I planted some turnip, some carrots, some parsnip, as well as some beets. And as you can see, I've only watered this garden maybe 4 times throughout this winter. And the reason I have eggs in here is because I crush my eggshells and feed them back to the chickens. And everything is done fairly well here this winter. Now we did lose some crops because it did go down to about 24, 25 below here in the winter time. But the concept with having a raised beds in greenhouses is you don't have to fill the whole greenhouse with really good topsoil. So what I did here, these panels that you see down in the bottom here, these panels are the inserts from steel doors or from fiberglass doors that when people order a big glass insert in their doors, those are cutouts and those are thrown out. This one here is actually a fiberglass one. And these are insulated. So I have those on the outside and on the inside. And probably this much of the bed is filled with decomposing material. So old logs, leaves, some really old wood chips that I make from my wood chipper. I put leaves through there as well. Then I put a layer of grass clippings, and then I put some soil, and then some better soil, and then a layer of rabbit manure and shredded newspaper from the chicken pen, and then more soil. So you don't have to fill this full of really good topsoil. And as this decomposes, it heats up. So the heat rises and the roots gravitate down toward it and they get the nutrients from it at the same time. So this is a nice concept. I got these for free. You can get these, I got these from Rona and from another place, but you can ask around. And as you can see, you know, this greenhouse is only 8 by 12. There's only a few of us in the house. There's just a couple of us in the house. And this will look a lot prettier when all the plastic is removed in, I'm going to say 2 or 3 weeks. So here we have a little bit of chaga on a birch tree. And chaga grows on trees, birch trees that are usually dying. And I make tea out of this stuff. Now on this particular one here, this stuff is fairly small. It's been picked over once before. And there's a little bit more just down on this one right here. So I've got a pot of chaga actually on my stove all the time, and I may pick a little bit of this here. I don't have a container here right now, but I may just pick some of this stuff and put it in my pocket, and I'll take you inside and show you what chaga tea looks like. You can research chaga tea on the internet and you'll see all of the medicinal benefits of this. One of the main ones is it's an anti-inflammatory, and yeah, good stuff. Alright, so we're just coming in from having picked just a little bit of chaga, and I'm going to add it to one of my 2 pots that I have. This one is just for chaga here, and I've already got a basket full of this big chunks of chaga, and basically I leave the chaga in here until my water doesn't look like tea water anymore. I probably had this in here for about 1.5 to 2 months, maybe even longer. So I'm just going to add the little nuggets in here, and then we're going to cook up a brew, and I'll show you how I like to prepare it. And that's about it. Voila! Alright, so our chaga has been boiling for a little while, and I like to just put a little bit of hard honey in mine. And my wife likes it straight up. Sometimes I'll put a little bit of cinnamon just to add a little bit of flavor to it. And as you can see, it's quite dark still, even though I've had this in here for a few months. You can probably see how dark this is in the cup here. Even though I'm more of a coffee drinker, this is really nice on certain days. I am going to do a whole section or segment at some point on making different teas. I do forage quite a bit of items from our property here on making teas. Queen Anne's lace. I collect quite a few rose hips. We grow a lot of different mints here as well to flavor some teas. And the chaga, I wanted to show you, I've got a few jars of this here that I harvest. Sometimes I just go for a walk in the woods. And Inonotus obliquus. Say that fast 10 times, but usually what I do in the pots, I break it down into parts, chunks like this, and I usually put this into our dehydrator for about an hour or so when I bring it in from the woods, just to make sure that it's nice and dry. And yeah, so it lasts quite a bit in that pot. I did mention also while I was in the greenhouse about the leeks, and that we dry them, and we use these quite often in soups and sauces and dishes and that. And they keep quite long after they've been dehydrated, and we've got quite a few jars of these. Oh, and this one's sealed quite hard, but oh, the smell is just divine. So let's go and have a nice cup of tea, and we'll get on to the next